Chapter 2474. Angelina had used her work to identify Fergus as the murderer in the King of Cooks finals, which was like a stone that stirred up 1,000 ripples. Hades had only used the popularity of the King of Cooks to repost a related tweet before the competition with a hard-like quote. However, Angelina had made such a move in front of more than 2 billion live viewers during the actual competition. From the 100 Beasts painting to Fergus' portrait, this was like a magic operation that had been premeditated for a long time. The atmosphere in the live broadcast was solemn. The staff looked at Johnny one after another. This was already a live broadcast incident, and it involved another major tycoon. Should they continue the live broadcast, or rather, how should they continue? Johnny turned his gaze to Nancy, who was at the judges' table. He couldn't make the decision on this matter, so it was up to Nancy to decide. Although the McCarthy family and the Dixon family had always been at odds, due to the status of the two families, it hadn't reached the point of falling out. Hades's previous actions could still be blamed on the contestants, and it had nothing to do with the program team. However, Angelina's actions in the King of Cooks finals were tantamount to putting the program team directly on the fire, and there was no way to get rid of the blame. Are the McCarthy family and the Dixon family planning to go to war? Why are they doing this in the show? Lucian sat in the office of the Micropush building, looking at the live broadcast interface with a dumbfounded expression. The tycoons weren't harmonious. After tens of thousands of years of development, there were far more grudges than friendships. However, as the tycoons gradually hid their edges, this kind of open dispute was no longer common. Whether it was the contestants' personal behavior, or the McCarthy family's behind-the-scenes instructions would depend on Nancy's performance. Damn it! How dare this bitch? On a private island on the edge of the Mara archipelago, a magnificent castle towered over it. On the platform on the second floor, Fergus, who had been arranged to temporarily hide from the limelight, threw the crystal wine glass in his hand to the ground. He gritted his teeth and looked at Angelina on the screen. Now, any Tom, Dick and Harry dared to provoke the tycoons? However, the popularity that had gradually been suppressed soared after the repeated actions of these two guys today, and it was completely out of control. Third young master, the patriarch has ordered you not to interfere in this matter anymore. The family will handle it. The robot was cleaning up the debris on the ground. A middle-aged man came upstairs and said calmly, "Colin, if we can't suppress this, what will happen?" Fergus asked the man. "Don't worry, third young master. There's nothing that the Dixon family can't suppress," the man said with an indifferent expression. In addition to the onlookers who didn't mind the drama, the various forces related to their interests were also concerned about the sudden change in the direction of public opinion. In the long river of history, such things had happened before. But no matter how ferocious the public opinion was, the corporations didn't fall. A bunch of commoners couldn't be considered a big deal. This time, it was a little different. The military's extra attention made this matter more uncertain. What was the role of the McCarthy family behind all of this? Almost everyone was waiting for Nancy's position. Would she suspend the show or support the contestants? This would be seen as the McCarthy family's attitude. At this moment, Nancy was also caught off guard by Angelina's sudden actions. If Hades's actions in the morning were still within her understanding, then Angelina's clear-cut performance really made her a little confused. Although Angelina performed well in this season's competition, she didn't intend to recruit her to McCarthy Manor. Without the McCarthy family's protection, offending and provoking the Dixon family like this was tantamount to throwing an egg at a rock. They would inevitably suffer retaliation. Nancy looked at the girl standing on the stage with a determined expression, and the man with clear eyes next to her. She suddenly felt a little funny. There might be many people with a strong sense of justice in this world, but the two bravest seemed to be standing on the final stage of the competition today. Then as the organizer, should she still hide? Shouldn't the pervert who killed an innocent girl bear the responsibility for his actions? Clap, clap, clap. Nancy clapped and stood up. She looked at Nancy with appreciation and said, "Although this appearance is unbearable, if I have to give a score for this wonderful performance, I'll give it the second full score today. I think this is an unexpected performance. It's also a scalp-numbing and deeply shocking performance. The scene was quiet for a while. At first, there was sparse applause, and then it gradually became the applause of the audience. Angelina bit her lower lip tightly, holding back her tears from rolling down her reddened eyes. From the moment the flower was splashed, she was ready to be driven off the stage, but she didn't expect to be rewarded with applause from the audience. Meg was very surprised. He knew that Nancy would probably not expel Angelina during the show. This was tantamount to admitting defeat to the Dixon family. And it would also completely destroy the competition, the most popular variety show on the internet. However, he did not expect Nancy to take a clear stand and praise Angelina. Then she went back to work. "Perhaps you can tell us why you created this piece of art?" Nancy asked as she looked at Angelina. This was also a question that lingered in everyone's mind. Angelina didn't just repost a tweet. From the painting of 100 beasts to the portrait of Fergus, the transformation of a bucket of flour must be the result of careful design and practice. And this may have happened much earlier than the start of this year's show. Everyone wanted to know why she did this, including Meg. Angelina looked at Nancy and felt encouraged by her gaze. She said in a low voice, "The girl who was killed by Fergus was my sister. She was 3 years older than me and my only family. He killed her, and he also killed my world." The scene fell into silence again. Nancy subconsciously clenched her fists and looked at Angelina, who was trembling slightly, full of pity. The judges and the on-site staff were also shocked. "I see." Mag came to a realization. Angelina was that girl's younger sister, so it was understandable why she liked him so much all of a sudden. It wasn't love, it was more of gratitude. The crowd was watching the show. The tycoons were calculating and trading. In this world, she was probably the only one who really cared about the girl who was killed by Fergus and buried under the tree. She was also the only one who really wanted the murderer to pay with his life. Even if it was like throwing an egg against a rock, she would still do it without hesitation. Her name is Selena, a girl with dimples when she smiles. The day before her 18th birthday, she was invited to join Horace's crew in the name of acting a role. No one has seen her since. 2 days ago, Horace admitted that Fergus killed her and buried her under the tree. "I want him to bear the consequences for what he did." Angelina's voice was a little low, but it was exceptionally firm. Chapter 2475. Angelina's confession was like a sudden clap of thunder. If it was said that the onlookers before were angry, they didn't have much empathy for the victim and couldn't resonate too strongly with him. However, Angelina's words made everyone deeply aware that the girl who was raped and killed by Fergus was a lively person. She was someone else's sister, a girl who loved to smile and had dimples, just like the cute girl next door. The people's anger was pushed to the peak. The powerlessness and anger of the destruction of a beautiful thing, and the feeling of insignificance in the face of the tycoons were infuriating. Damn it, Fergus. He should be sentenced to death. The whole internet requests the judge to sentence Fergus. The so-called justice is just a joke under the control of the tycoons. She must have been so sad in the past 3 years, but she never showed it in her works. She didn't bring this emotion to her fans. What a gentle person. The audience expressed their anger and pity for Angelina. She was the one who posted that tweet. Meg thought about the tweet he had forwarded in the morning. There were many coincidences in the world, but he didn't expect them to come together today. Looking at the resolute Angelina, it was obvious that she was fully aware of the consequences of exposing Fergus. She was determined to die together with him. "It seems that after today's competition, there's something I have to do in advance." Meg lowered his eyes, but he had already made up his mind. The show continued. Nancy's concern made the audience feel the warmth of the show. But after all, this was the finals of the King of Chefs competition. So, after dissecting the matter, she brought the show back on track and began to give the judges their scores. Perhaps it was a tacit understanding, or perhaps it was a silent protest, but Angelina received full marks from the judges. Angelina's score: judges score 90, online PK score 9.8, total score 99.8. An equally shocking score appeared on the big screen. Angelina received a very high score with an amazing performance, almost close to full marks. The host smiled and said, "But it's a bit of a pity." With a slight disadvantage of 0.2 points, he ranked second behind Hades, who scored full marks. Let's congratulate contestant Hades. He is the first contestant in the history of the Chef King tournament with a perfect score. He is the champion of this year's Chef King tournament and is honored with the title of Chef King. The crowd burst into thunderous applause and petals flew in the air. Meg stood up with a smile. Under the guidance of the host, he came to the center of the stage and began to give his acceptance speech. Hashtag the Chef King Finals accuses Fergus of murder. Hashtag Angelina is the sister of the victim of Fergus murder. Has hashtag Fergus been arrested? Hashtag Fergus go to jail. More than 10 hot searches appeared on Weibo's hot search list, causing a huge uproar among the public. It was even more popular than the Horace incident. The public opinion was fierce, and the angry crowd wanted nothing more than to drill through the net and kill Fergus on the spot. Boss, the Dixon family's request. Amos connected to Lucian and said with some difficulty, "Tell them that there's nothing we can do about it." Lucian directly interrupted Amos's words and warned, "No matter who greets you, ignore them. This matter is no longer something we can participate in." "Okay, I'll reply to them right away," Amos replied. After hanging up, Lucian looked at the Weibo's backend data and frowned. The number of edits related to Fergus had exceeded 100 million in 10 minutes, and the number of searches and views had exceeded 2 billion. After being the CEO of Weibo for so many years, this was the first time he had seen such a situation. He thought that the Horace incident would end after the Horace incident, but he didn't expect it to become a series of climax after climax. The trial of Horace, Hades, Fergus, and Angelina's accusation of Fergus in the finals. She even revealed the identity of the victim's sister. It was completely an inspirational script for a civilian girl's revenge. This time, the Dixon family had to pay the price for their arrogance. Even with their background, they had to lower their proud heads in the face of such turbulent public opinion. This girl is too pitiful. Fergus, that bastard, really deserves to die. On the top floor of the Twin Towers, Akali was sitting on the sofa, wiping her tears as she angrily said this. "Young miss, the third master wants to talk to you." The secretary quickly came in. "Just say that I'm sleeping and won't answer." Akali coldly said. "Yes." The secretary replied before quickly leaving. "At this time, you still want me to clear your precious son's name? He go to jail." Akali curled her lips. She opened her wristband and dialed a number. "I want to protect someone. The commission is 30 million. Family head, the influence of this matter is too big. There is also the McCarthy family's interference, and the Weibo side isn't willing to cooperate, so we can't suppress it anymore. Moreover, the anger has shifted from young Master Fergus to the Dixon family. There are already many proposals to boycott the Fergus family's products on the internet, and they have received widespread support. We have to make a decision as soon as possible and minimize the influence of this matter on the Dixon family." A man who looked like a lawyer stood in front of Merlin and said this. Merlin's expression was serious, and the anger on his face was hard to hide. He said in a deep voice, "Send this person to the investigation department and report it on the internet. Have this matter end as soon as possible." "Understood." The lawyer quickly turned to leave. "Tell him not to appear in Tucker City for 10 years. If he causes trouble again, I definitely won't let him off." Merlin ordered the housekeeper beside him. Very soon, the news of the Dixon family escorting Fergus to the investigation department appeared on the hot search list with a video attached. Hashtag Fergus surrenders. It directly reached the top of the hot search list. Following this, the Tucker City Investigation Department also released a tweet, confirming that Fergus had turned himself in. The investigation had already begun, and the results would be announced as soon as possible. On the other side, after the Chef King competition award ceremony ended, Nancy gave Meg the Chef King medal and announced that Hades would be the McCarthy Manor's chef. This was the first time news of a special hire had been announced on the show. It was meant as a reward, but it was also meant to protect Hades. After all, He had completely offended the Dixon family. Nancy's statement on behalf of the McCarthy family would at least make the Dixon family hesitate and not dare make a move against him. This is all over the internet. Please take Angelina in as well, Nancy. Please protect her. Although Fergus has already gone in, I'm starting to worry about Angelina's safety. Chapter 2476. Angelina already knew that Fergus had surrendered himself to the police. She smiled and looked at Hades, who was standing on the stage. The golden light shone on him, making him look so dazzling. This year's Chef's Championship will come to an end. Contestant Hades came out of nowhere and won the championship. His comeback was amazing and will definitely leave a deep mark in the history of the Chef's Championship. Contestant Angelina's performance was also memorable. Her score of 99.8 points will forever be remembered in the history of the Chef's Championship. Thank you to every contestant for your wonderful contribution. The show came to an end with the host's polite remarks. The live broadcast was over. Fergus got up and bowed to the judges and staff on the scene to express his gratitude. This year's Chef King tournament started low and went high. Starting from the quarter-finals, it had reached a climax one after another. No matter if it was the attention or the topic, it was far ahead of the previous years. It had reached a height that even he could not replicate. Then, he sacrificed a direct descendant of a conglomerate and made more than a dozen A-listers in the entertainment industry blow themselves up. This kind of thing, he didn't dare to think about it. Congratulations. Angelina walked up to Meg. Although her eyes were red, her smile was clean and bright. Thank you. Meg smiled and nodded. He felt a little sorry for her. Fergus' arrest should be a comfort to her. But Nancy didn't take her in. How was she going to deal with the Dixon family's revenge? I should thank you for everything you've done, but I'm sorry that you've been put in danger. Angelina looked apologetic. I just followed my heart and did something that I should do. You don't have to thank me. Meg shook his head slightly and looked at her deeply. Then he said goodbye and left. He didn't want others to think that they were working together premeditated, which was inconsistent with the truth. Mr. Hades, Angelina called out to Meg. She quickly stepped forward and stuffed something into his hand. It's nice to meet you. Maybe we won't meet again, but I'll always remember you, Angelina said seriously. Then, she turned and walked away quickly with a red face. Meg watched her disappear at the door and walked out of the recording hall. He opened his hand and looked at the blue water droplet pendant lying quietly in his hand. It was a very ordinary crystal pendant, but it was clear and clean just like her. Who's going to protect her now? Meg asked she, who was following behind him. I'll protect her for a while, Shiqing said coldly. Meg nodded slightly, put away the pendant and said, that guy who turned himself in was a fake, right? She's eyes were filled with surprise. Don't be surprised. Scapegoats aren't a specialty of your dungeon. There was a hint of mockery in Meg's smile. However, your underground city's bureaucrats are really rotten to the core. You still dare to accept the fake is real at this time. An important direct descendant of a plutocrat family will raise a shadow from a young age. Whether it's appearance, habits, or temperament, it's very similar to the original owner. Other than those close to them, it's hard to tell them apart, she explained. I want his current position. What do you want to do? You know very well. Their eyes met, and the two of them were silent for a long time. In the end, she looked away first. Meg's bracelet lit up and a location popped up. The Mara Islands, 30,000 kilometers away. Lend me your battleship. A flying car painted by the military stopped in front of the Mocha building. Two young officers alighted and were led into the building by the Mocha Group's executives. Soon after, the two officers came out of the building, accompanied by Angelina. Immediately after, the Dungeon Military Secretariat issued a tweet. The military's first special chef, Angelina, officially joins the army today. Dixon Group this. Meg had just come out of Nancy's office and was stunned when he saw the tweet. He did not expect the military to do this, at least in the atmosphere. Not only did they let Angelina join the army directly, but they also directly mentioned the Dixon family. What did this mean? This was a blatant warning. If anything happened to Angelina, It would be the Dixon family's doing. If there was anyone in the dungeon that no one dared to touch, the military was definitely one of them. Nancy had already confirmed with him that he would join McCarthy Manor, and would take him there tomorrow to officially join. He had half a day of free time today. The mission of sneaking into McCarthy Manor was more than half completed. Back in the dormitory, Meg locked the doors and windows, avoided the various detection equipment in the building, and left the Mocha facility. I didn't expect this to be what you meant by protection. Sitting in the battleship, Meg looked at She with appreciation. You should know very well that this is not something I can decide, she said expressionlessly, and drove the battleship away from Tucker City. Meg smiled and did not say anything. He naturally knew that to do this to this extent, it must be that person who gave the nod. He naturally would not miss the opportunity to beat the tycoons. That private island is an important stronghold of the Dixon family, and has an all-weather defense system. According to our intelligence, in order to protect Fergus, there should be a half-step transcendent powerhouse on the island. Are you sure you want to go on the island? She pulled up a map of the island's defenses. If I let that kid get away with it, I'll definitely feel uncomfortable, Meg said with a smile. She nodded slightly, and pulled up a list of information. Barkle, a half-step transcendent powerhouse, good at using a saber and extremely strong. She began to explain the information to Meg. I'll cooperate with you in this operation. From the moment you land on the island, you must leave the island within 5 minutes to avoid the arrival of the other party's transcendent powerhouse. She turned off the bracelet and looked at Meg with a serious expression. You should know the difference between the transcendent and half-step transcendent better than I do. 5 minutes is enough. Meg nodded. I know you've always been fast. She also nodded slightly. Meg frowned, and felt that there was something wrong with these words. Half an hour later, the vast sea appeared in sight. On the sea, there were hundreds of scattered islands. They had arrived at the Mara Islands. I'll help you kill Barkle first. I won't interfere with the rest, she said to Meg, who was about to jump off the ship, as the battleship hovered invisibly. No problem. Meg, who had changed into black clothes, agreed and jumped off the battleship. A black longsword appeared under his feet, and he flew into the air, flying toward the small island 10 miles away. At the same time, he turned on the camera and started a live broadcast. In order to avoid alerting the enemy, he turned on a delayed live broadcast and set the time to 5 minutes. Trial Fergus. Fergus turned himself in? Just a shadow won't do. End of chapter. Chapter 2477. Meg streaked across the sky like a startled leaf, heading straight for the small island at the edge of the Mara archipelago. After avoiding the area where the heavy firepower was concentrated, Mag slashed open the emergency defensive barrier on the island with his sword, and landed on the island. Although it was called a small island, it was actually not small. The Mara archipelago had a total of 32 islands, and this island was ranked 5th in size. In an instant, the island's alarms went off. Who dares trespass on the island? A majestic voice exploded like thunder as a 2-meter-tall man, with a full beard jumped down from a high place, with a thick black saber in his hand. His pair of bell-sized eyes stared at Meg and narrowed. Judge! That's right. Meg grinned and said in a low voice. Clown, you actually dared to deliver yourself to my doorstep. Watch me peel off your skin today, and let everyone see your cowardice. Barker shouted angrily as flames suddenly rose from his saber. The hard rock beneath his feet instantly shattered as his sturdy body shot out, and slashed at Meg with his saber. Half-step transcendent, the same realm as Meg. Since becoming a demigod, Meg had not fought with a master of the same level. Such an opponent could only be found in the underground city. This was a rare opportunity, so he had to make good use of it. This guy actually killed his way to my doorstep. In the villa's safe house, Fergus looked at Meg in a black suit on the screen, his voice filled with anger and fear. The family had already given up on him, so they sent the Shadow to the investigation bureau. His many years of work had been destroyed by this guy in front of him. He wanted nothing more than to skin him alive. But what scared him the most was, how did this guy find this place? Did he know that he was hiding here? If this matter was exposed, who knew what kind of chaos it would cause? Third young master, rest assured. Master Barker is a half-step transcendent. That guy is just a clown. Just kill him and throw him into the sea, the butler said calmly as he brought over a glass of wine. Fergus calmed down a little when he heard this. That's right, what was he afraid of? The family had asked Master Barker to protect him to prevent such a thing from happening. No matter how strong that guy was, could he still be a god? Mag looked at Barkle, who was charging at him like a heavy truck. A terrifying pressure emanated from his body. That was a kind of aura, a powerful aura brought about by absolute power. If the person standing here was a 10th tier being, they probably wouldn't even be able to move. According to the intelligence analysis given by She, Barkle was a fire element close combat powerhouse. He was famous for his terrifying outburst and absolute strength. Among his peers, he was one of the best in close combat. What a coincidence. What I'm best at is also close combat. Under the mask, Meg's lips curled up slightly. Barkle's terrifying figure appeared in front of Meg in an instant. His black heavy saber dragged a dozen meters of flame as it slashed down at Meg. The moment the long blade fell, Meg's feet moved slightly and disappeared from the spot. At the same time, the long sword in his hand pierced out 5 times in 1 second, twisting and tearing the void apart. Boom! The long saber struck the ground, creating a trench that was tens of meters long and several meters wide. The rocks were melted by the flames and turned into magma. Even the entire island shook. The blow of a half-step transcendent realm master was terrifying. Unfortunately, Meg's speed was too fast. Besides 2 small holes in the corners of his clothes, he did not suffer any substantial damage. On the other side, Barkle fell to the ground with 5 bloody holes in his chest, abdomen and thigh. Half-step transcendent. Barkle looked at Meg, his expression becoming dignified for the first time. The wounds on his body were healing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Did your talent increase healing? Why didn't you increase it all to defense? Meg cursed silently. A transcendent realm opponent really had thick skin and flesh. If it had been a level 10 master, these few sword strikes would have been enough to pierce through them and send them flying. This guy is also a half-step transcendent. Fergus was shocked, his hand trembling as he held the wine glass, spilling wine all over his trousers. The steward was also a little surprised, but he still calmly said, "Third young master doesn't need to worry. I've already reported this to the family. Soon, a transcendent realm master will come to support us. Before that, we only need to stay here. I don't have time to play with you. Your young master is still waiting for me." Meg held his sword horizontally in front of him and declared arrogantly, "That depends on whether you can step over me." Barkle's eyes flashed with anger. No one in the same realm dared to look down on him like this. Meg didn't waste any more words with him, and with a thought, disappeared from where he stood. Suddenly, sword chi and murderous intent filled the air. Barkle's expression became dignified. The shield pendant on his waist lit up, and a black armor instantly appeared on his body. The long saber in his hand drew a circle on the ground, and a wall of flames appeared, surrounding him as he vigilantly scanned his surroundings. Suddenly, a light flashed across his eyes and the long saber in his hand slashed out behind him, causing space to distort and flames to erupt. The wall of flames parted, and a dark shadow stabbed out with the sword. However, when the saber slashed out and cut the dark shadow in half, it hit nothing but air. This dark shadow was actually an afterimage. Damn it! Barkle was shocked. A sharp sword cry rang in his ears, and he quickly pulled back his saber, while activating all the defensive artifacts he had on him. In a duel between peak masters, victory or defeat was often decided by a hair's breadth, and this was even more true in a pure melee. The sharp sword light pierced through the layers of protective shields, like popping a Matryoshka doll's balloon, then pierced through the seemingly indestructible armor and into the softest part of his neck. In the face of death, Barkle finally displayed the strength of a half-step transcendent realm master. His armor burst and his whole body transformed into lava, his defense rising sharply as he forcibly blocked the tip of the sword that had pierced into his body. At the same time, Yongkai slashed out with his saber full of determination. With Barkle's body as the center, The temperature within 100 meters of him suddenly rose and flames even appeared in the air. The flame domain had been activated. Now that's interesting. Mag let go of the long sword that was stuck in his hand and retreated rapidly. Within the flame domain, his figure became visibly slower. What no one saw was that his hand, which was hidden under his wide sleeve, had taken out a kitchen knife and slashed at the void behind him. The space distorted, and a crack appeared in the flame domain. Meg's figure flickered, and he slipped out of the flame domain like a fish. A silver sword appeared in his hand again, and he slashed out with it. Cyan sword chi shot out like a rainbow and collided with Barkle's saber in the air. The cyan and red blades collided evenly matched. Sword come. Mag spat out 2 words softly. At the same time, double pupils appeared in Meg's eyes. Barkle was stunned for a moment. A black heavy sword pierced through the air, and in a flash, crossed a distance of several 100 meters, and pierced through Barkle's back and out of his chest. End of chapter. Chapter 2478. Barkle looked at the huge hole in his chest. His eyes were filled with unwillingness and disbelief as he slowly knelt on the ground. Dozens of miles away, She's finger moved away from the trigger. She could not hide the shock on her usually calm face. She was so used to seeing him busy in the kitchen that she almost forgot that this was an existence who dared to challenge the great old one single-handedly. In a battle of the same level, Meg killed his opponent in 2 minutes. The strength that Meg showed completely exceeded her expectations. Barkle is dead. The wine glass in Fergus' hand fell to the ground and shattered. His face was pale and terrified. Barkle was a half-step transcendent powerhouse that the family worshipped, but he was easily killed in a few rounds. What kind of strength was that guy? Transcendent. My life is over. Fergus' body could not stop trembling. He regretted it. If he had known, he would have turned himself in. At least he would not have to face this god of death. The butler's face was also pale. Barkle's death had completely broken his psychological defense, but he still comforted. Third young master, please rest assured. The safe house's defense system has been fully activated. We only need to hold on for 5 more minutes. Family reinforcements will arrive soon. He may not be able to find the safe house. Before the butler could finish his words, the man in black had already appeared in the camera outside the safe house and made a Y sign at the camera. He's here. He's here. Fergus jumped up in fright and shrank into a corner. His eyes were filled with fear. Don't worry, young master. This door was personally reinforced by a transcendent powerhouse. Even if he's a transcendent powerhouse, he won't be able to break the door in 5 minutes. Bang! 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 A series of explosions rang out. The heavy door shook violently and was on the verge of collapsing. The high-precision machinery was directly broken and lost its effectiveness. Bang! The 10,000-kilogram door was kicked open. The butler, whose eyes were wide open, was directly pressed under the door and turned into a pile of meat paste. The military's door-breaking bombs were specially developed to deal with corporations, right? Meg walked into the safe house with his sword and looked at the door that was destroyed by the bomb. If he had to break the door himself, he might not be able to open it in 3 to 5 minutes. Don't kill me. Don't kill me. I'll give you anything you want, everything. Don't kill me, please. Fergus was so scared that he pissed his pants. He knelt on the ground and didn't even notice that his legs were bleeding from the glass. Fergus Dixon, identity confirmed. Meg looked down at Ferguson and said sarcastically, "Shouldn't you be squatting in the investigation bureau of Tucker City? Why are you here?" "That's my shadow. That's my shadow. Please send me to jail." "I'll accept the judgment of the law. I want to pay the price for what I've done. Please, I want to go to jail. I want to go to jail," Fergus cried and begged. He just wanted to get away from this killing god. Even if he had to stay in prison for the rest of his life, it would still be better than being killed here. He didn't even dare to think about Horace's miserable state. Jail? If jail is useful, what's the point of having judges? Meg sneered. If you come out after a few years in prison, how can the souls of those innocent souls who died in your hands and those girls who were defiled by you live in peace? Fergus' face was as pale as paper. He wanted to continue begging and stall for time. Fergus Dixon, you are now on trial. 3 years ago, you raped and killed Selena. There are witnesses and material evidence. You are sentenced to death and will be executed today. Meg announced loudly as he walked towards Fergus with his sword in hand. Don't kill me. Don't kill me. I'm a direct descendant of the Dixon family. If you kill me, the Dixon family won't let you off. Fergus retreated as he cried out in fear. Wait until I become a transcendent. I'll use your Dixon family's transcendent to practice my skills. Meg thought as he pointed his sword at Fergus' eyes. It was this pair of eyes that took a liking to that girl first. Then it's time to destroy them. With a light tap of the sword, the sound of an eyeball exploding could be heard, accompanied by Fergus' screams and curses. If you can't control your hands, then don't bother. The sword swung down and chopped off a pair of hands. This last strike is to remind all the descendants of the corporations that the law may not be able to punish you, but I can. Unless you hide by your transcendent ancestor's side, I will appear anywhere. Meg's sword pierced Fergus' chest and gouged out a heart that was still beating. He threw it aside in disdain. It's time to go. The other party's transcendent will be here in 3 minutes. She's voice came from the earpiece. Okay. Meg sheathed his sword and turned around. He flew away from the island under the terrified gazes of the maids. Meg returned to the battleship. The battleship immediately started and flew towards the depths of the sea. Meg sat in the co-pilot seat and clicked on the micro-push button. He edited the previous video and uploaded it to the micro-push button. He then used the recorded video to start a live stream. Trial Fergus' livestream quickly rose to the top of the micro-push button. #Trial Fergus. The topic also rose rapidly. Fuck. The judge is live streaming again. What's going on? Didn't Fergus turn himself in? Killing the half-step transcendent Barkle alone. The judge is so strong. The one who was sent to prison was the shadow. The corporations are so shameless. This is so satisfying. This kind of lawless scum should be punished like this. Sons of the corporations tremble in fear. The investigation bureau is so useless. They didn't even know they took in a fake. Useless. The live stream and video quickly spread. Although they were quickly banned, it did not affect the spread and popularity of this incident. She looked at Meg in silence. Ask whatever you want. Don't hold it in. Meg took off his mask and said with a smile as he took a bottle of iced happy drink for himself. I hope this is the last time something like this happens. You've created a lot of chaos in the underground city and are constantly challenging the bottom line of the underground city's laws. It's very likely that you'll bring about large-scale copycat crimes, she said with a serious expression. If you were the one standing in front of Fergus with a sword, would you kill him? Meg looked at she and asked. If an ordinary person commits a crime, the ordinary person will be gone. If a corporation commits a crime, the law will be gone. Meg took a sip of Coke and smiled mockingly. Is this the bottom line? She fell silent again. All right, I won't commit any more crimes in the short term. I'm just a passerby. If it wasn't for Angelina, I wouldn't be here today. I'm not a saint. I just like to follow my heart. Meg closed his eyes and turned on the massage chair. Although the battle between the half-step transcendent was short, there were still many details that were worth reviewing. It was not that Barkle was too weak, but that he had too many trump cards. Whether it was the mental influence or the flying sword, they were all strange moves that went beyond conventional combat methods. That was why he could kill him in such a short time. Chapter 2479. Angelina had just finished the enlistment procedures and was sitting outside the recruit office in the Hexagon building. When she saw the news on her bracelet, her eyes instantly turned red, and she quickly walked to the bathroom. After a while, she came out with red eyes. The haze on her face seemed to have disappeared at this moment. The scum that she thought she would never be able to take down was finally dead. He had been tried and sentenced to death in the name of her sister. Angelina, the procedures have been completed for you. I've also sent you some things to pay attention to in the army. Now, I'll take you to see where you'll be working for the next period of time. The Hexagon building is the military headquarters. A middle-aged female officer walked out of the office and called out to Angelina, talking to her while walking. Angelina's expression became serious as she seriously listened. From today onwards, she was no longer the internet celebrity Angelina, but rather a soldier. My son. In front of the island villa ruins, a middle-aged man was kneeling on the ground crying. A white-bearded old man was floating in the air, looking down. His face was filled with anger and a bit of seriousness. Old ancestor, this is the video footage from the scene. There's very little useful information, and it's all been destroyed. A person came forward with a holographic projector and said while playing the video, according to what the people at the scene saw, that person is very strong, and his moves are very strange. He killed Barkle in just 2 to 3 minutes. I don't know if he's a transcendent. He's not a transcendent. The old man shook his head. If the other side was a transcendent, why would it take 2 minutes to kill Barkle? He's a half-step transcendent, but his strength isn't bad. Old ancestor, you have to take revenge for Fergus. He is provoking our Dixon family, slapping our faces. The middle-aged man kneeling on the ground turned around and looked up at the old man in the sky as he cried out. The old man coldly looked at him. The middle-aged man suddenly felt like he had fallen into an ice cave, and his voice suddenly stopped. You raised this kind of waste, and you dare ask the family to take revenge for him? The old man's expression was cold as he said in a cold voice, within a month, if you can't calm the impact of this matter on the family, you'll be expelled from the family. He's actually dead? On the top floor of the Twin Towers, Akali saw the scene of Fergus' eyes being dug out, and his heart being dug out. She felt that the top-grade sour beef soup in her hand didn't taste good, and she wanted to vomit. Turning off the video, she vomited a few times into the trash can that her secretary quickly brought over before Akali slowly calmed down. All of you leave. Akali waved her hand to chase away the maids and secretaries. She was the only one left in the empty room. Fergus was dead, but her mood was a bit strange. Speaking of which, she should be happy. She had cursed this guy more than once to hurry up and die, but when she really saw his eyes gouged out, his heart dug out, and then he died, she felt extreme physical and psychological discomfort. He really did deserve to die. After all the bad things he had done, even if he died 10 times, it wouldn't be enough to make up for it. This is a good thing for the people. We don't need to see that disgusting fellow at family gatherings in the future. Thinking of this, isn't it wonderful? Akali thought of this, and her mood gradually became better. But Hades Horus is dead. Fergus is also dead. Is this fellow a death god? Akali rubbed her chin. Speaking of which, she originally wanted to go to Nancy to intercept Hades, but the matter with Fergus was too big. No matter what, she was still the daughter of the Dixon family, so it wasn't suitable for her to have too much contact with Hades. Moreover, with how petty the patriarch was, he most likely wouldn't let Hades and Angelina off. Hearing that Angelina had already been taken away by the military, Merlin wouldn't touch this bad luck. Now he could only hope that Nancy would place more importance on Hades. As long as he entered the McCarthy family, he would be safe. This kind of high-quality man, giving him to Nancy, it really makes people unwilling. Akali was a bit annoyed as she tapped on Hades' page. After looking at it for a bit, she exited and gave a sigh. Meg returned to the Mocha building and didn't go out again. He locked the door and sat in front of his desk with a normal history book in his hand. It looked like he was reading a book, but he was actually digesting the information the system had collected in his mind, including the secret information the system had obtained from invading the large families. Tomorrow, he would follow Nancy and officially enter the McCarthy Manor, which would be the first step of this mission. But this mission was to find traces of Counselor Tam in the McCarthy family and confirm his condition. Whether he was dead or alive, there had to be an explanation. Did you think that you could find this kind of information as long as you entered the McCarthy family? If it was that simple, Ferdinand wouldn't have let him cross the border. If Meg had to slowly investigate by himself, not to mention a week, he might not be able to find anything in the McCarthy family that was guarded by transcendence in a year. At this time, the cheat was very important. The technology the system grasped was indeed weaker than the dungeon, but this was the initial setting the heavens had set for it. But the system itself was definitely better than the current artificial intelligence of the dungeon. The reason was very simple. The artificial intelligence of the dungeon was limited by the level of technology of the dungeon, and the upper limit of the system was determined by the heavens. When it came to the competition, the system won. Therefore, after the system connected to the dungeon network through Meg, it started to plunder the civilization of the dungeon and completed its self-evolution. During this process, the system successfully hacked into the underground city's government, military, and various tycoons' internal networks, and obtained a huge amount of confidential documents. After sorting and summarizing the massive amount of information, the final thing that appeared in Meg's mind was a 32G document. That's it. Meg frowned. How long would he have to look at this? It's okay, the system will directly feed it to you. Just as the system finished speaking, the document turned into countless light spots. Meg felt that he was instantly filled up. The amount of information was much more than the usual recipe. After a full 3 hours, Meg stood up and poured himself a glass of water before letting out a sigh of relief. The system's method of instilling information was indeed good. Normally, it would take 3 months to digest the information, but he had digested it in his mind in 3 hours. Information was like spider silk. When you only had 1 or 2 strands, it was difficult to obtain anything. But when you saw countless spider silk that overlapped to form a spider web, the truth would naturally appear before you. Councilman Tam was a radical councilman who was born as a commoner. He criticized the privileges of the tycoons and took the lead in drafting a bill to weaken the tycoons. This method of weakening the power of the tycoons naturally became a thorn in their side. This information could be found in the internal documents of the tycoons. He's so reckless without any backing. His disappearance is not unjustified. Meg muttered. Though he respected such people who fought for the people, he didn't agree with his method of striking a stone with an egg. From the intertwined information network, Meg found some clear clues. The McCarthy family was involved in the kidnapping of Councilman Tam, but they weren't the only ones. From the clues of the various tycoons, all the evidence pointed to a mysterious organization, the Undying. End of chapter. Chapter 2480. This mysterious organization with a long history was almost invisible in the world of ordinary people, but it was inextricably linked to the various corporations. Previously, Meg knew that this organization was definitely related to the corporations. Perhaps the corporations were the financial backers, but from the internal intelligence of the various corporations, this relationship seemed to be more complicated. The corporations weren't the ones controlling the Undying. Instead, the corporations seemed to be worshipping the Undying. The Undying seemed to have something that the corporations were afraid of, or something that the corporations were willing to lower their heads and flatter. All the clues pointed to the existence of such a thing, but none of the clues clearly stated what it was. It seemed to be a taboo existence. Of course, the corporations weren't pushovers either. The relationship between the two was more of a cooperative one. The disappearance of Counselor Tam was definitely related to the Undying. The McCarthy family was playing the role of the perpetrator. It was certain that Counselor Tam wasn't brought into the McCarthy manor. From the confidential information within the McCarthy family, on the day of the kidnapping, Counselor Tam was handed over to the Undying. Isn't this nonsense? Even if he's in, what's the use? Meg pouted. He had tried his best to use the title of the Chef King to sneak into the McCarthy manor, but he wasn't even there. Meg paced in the room and pondered. After a long while, his eyes lit up. It's Ferdinand's intelligence that's wrong. As long as I can get that confidential information and pass it to Ferdinand, my mission will be completed, Meg thought. That confidential information was sent to Patriarch Theodore by the McCarthy family's third master, Gardner. Gardner was the CEO of the DeMarco Financial Group under the McCarthy family, and he was also the supervisor of the McCarthy family's external operations department. The kidnapping of Counselor Tam was planned and facilitated by him. Meg had already obtained the confidential information, But if he handed it to Ferdinand directly, it wouldn't be easy to explain. How should he explain? He couldn't possibly say that he was a genius who had learned how to become a super hacker after coming to the dungeon for a few days. He hacked into the McCarthy family's internal network and stole the information. How did he manage to get his hands on something that even the powerful intelligence network of the military couldn't get their hands on? Meg had a clear understanding of Ferdinand, since the other party dared to let him enter the underground city and allowed him to visit the Divine Monument. He must have felt that he could control everything about him. If his performance was too abnormal and exceeded his expectations, this cooperative relationship might collapse. It seemed that he still had to go to McCarthy Manor. It was time to show his true acting skills. Judgment of Fergus had caused a huge uproar in the underground city. Seeing the young master of a tycoon, who had committed many evil deeds and could not be punished, being judged and executed, everyone was delighted. As for the young masters of the major corporations, they disappeared almost simultaneously. The princes and princesses of the night parties, as well as the hosts of the top parties, all disappeared without a trace. Even those arrogant youngsters who relied on their family's power and influence had become much more docile. Even a direct descendant of a tycoon like Fergus was still judged and executed under the protection of a half-step transcendent powerhouse. What were they? This fellow killed 2 people and eliminated the tycoon's bad habit of being arrogant and despotic for so many years. Indeed, those who are arrogant are afraid of those who don't care about their lives. Ferdinand looked at the document that his secretary had just sent over, and a smile appeared on his cold face. He admired this young man's ability and wisdom very much. There was no one in the younger generation in the underground city who could be on par with him. Unfortunately, he came from the Norland continent. The next morning, Meg received a message from Nancy's assistant. He packed his personal belongings briefly and followed the assistant through the VIP lift to the rooftop. A small fighter jet was parked on the wide rooftop. Meg was a little surprised. Wasn't McCarthy Manor in Tucker City? It was only tens of kilometers away, and it would only take a dozen minutes by flying car. Wasn't it a little exaggerated to board a fighter jet? It was arranged by Miss Nancy. You just have to board the plane, the assistant said with a sweet smile. Meg nodded and quickly boarded the fighter jet. Have a seat. We'll set off soon. Nancy was already on the fighter jet, and she smiled at Meg. He could tell that she was in a good mood today. She was wearing a floral daisy dress. Compared to her dignified appearance a few days ago, she looked a little more fresh. Meg sat down opposite her. Fergus is dead. You should know, right? Nancy said, staring at Meg with her beautiful eyes. Yes, I saw it yesterday. He deserved it. Meg nodded. It could be seen that Nancy was really attentive to him. The fighter jet was most likely to prevent the Dixon family from doing anything to him. Angelina should be very gratified. After all, the murderer who killed her sister has finally paid the price. Nancy was a little emotional. Even if that fellow dies, he can't get her sister back, Meg said softly. Nancy pursed her lips and was silent for 3 seconds. She changed the topic and said, When you return to the manor, someone from the chef's department will receive you and arrange your life and work. I've already talked to them. You're a specially hired chef. You only need to be responsible for the family banquet and the meals of the core family members. Understood. Meg nodded. From today onwards, he was a worker. When you go back, you have to be careful of Norma. That girl is petty. You used her Medusa waste to cook. She'll definitely make things difficult for you when you go back. Nancy warned again. But you don't have to worry too much. If she bullies you, just tell me. I'll make her restrain herself. Meg nodded, but his mind was active. Norma McCarthy was the precious daughter of Nancy's third uncle Gardner. She was spoiled by nature and didn't seem to get along with Nancy. He was brought into the McCarthy family by Nancy, so he was bound to be labeled as Nancy's loyal dog. Moreover, he killed her pet snake for its waste. It would be strange if she didn't make things difficult for him when he went back. The situation didn't seem to be good, but Meg already had a rough plan in his mind. He wasn't here to marry into the family. He He had to run away immediately after completing the task. Why would he need to be careful? The fighter took off and hovered on a lawn a few minutes later. Meg followed Nancy out of the fighter and looked at the wide lawn and the luxurious villas. It was like a different world from the hundreds of buildings in the distance. In the center of Tucker City, where every inch of land was worth gold, only the top 10 conglomerates could be so extravagant and ostentatious. Welcome home, 2nd Mississippi. A middle-aged man dressed like a butler and a dozen maids and servants bowed. Nancy said a few words to the housekeeper and then left. The butler watched Nancy's back as she left. Only then did he walk towards Meg. Mr. Hades, I'm Miss Nancy's personal butler, Boson. Please come with me. I'll take you to familiarize yourself with the manor and some precautions for entering the job, the butler said as he led Meg to a side path. Chapter 2481. McCarthy Manor occupied a large area. It was like a small, independent city, separated from the outside world. Meg listened to Boson's introduction while sizing up the luxurious manor, verifying it with the information and map in his mind. He felt 3 terrifying auras in the depths of the manor, which was the core of the entire manor. 3 transcendents were guarding the manor, and these were not all the transcendents in the McCarthy family. Such a background was truly shocking. The entry process of a large family was quite cumbersome. Even though he was personally brought back by Nancy, he still had to go through multiple checks before finally receiving his work pass. Even with the work pass, as a chef, his activity area in the manor was still limited. So-called specially hired chefs, other than the title and salary, were no different from maids in the eyes of the plutocrats. Congratulations! You've officially become a member of the McCarthy Manor. This will be the most glorious day of your life. Boson looked at Mag, who had come out with his badge, with a gratified expression. Even working a shift is brainwashing, Meg complained in his heart. Even in the underground city, his most glorious day should have been when he won first place in the Chef King competition with a full score. After exchanging a few pleasantries with Boson, Meg excused himself and wanted to rest in the dormitory. Boson brought Meg to the chef's dormitory. As a specially hired chef, Meg could get a separate suite. But before he reached the dormitory, he saw a young girl in a JK uniform sitting on the low wall in front of the villa. Her pair of slender legs dangled, swaying and glistening. Oh no! Boson's expression changed slightly. Meg glanced at the young girl. She was about 15 or 16 years old. This could be inferred from her ordinary figure, similar to Barbara's. But when he saw her face, Meg squinted his eyes. This young girl looked similar to Nancy, but compared to Nancy's cold and noble appearance, she had a pair of peach blossom eyes. As if hearing footsteps, the young girl suddenly turned her head and fixed her gaze on Meg's face, revealing a playful smile. Norma McCarthy. Meg recognized the young girl's identity at a glance. But why was she in the chef's dormitory? Were you waiting for me? Meg pretended to be confused and continued to walk forward half a step behind Boson. Miss Norma, you're here. Boson humbly stepped forward to greet her. He lowered his head, not daring to look at the pair of slender white legs. Are you Hades? The girl sitting on the low wall ignored Boson and asked Meg. Meg did not have the habit of lowering his head in front of women, so he looked straight at that pair of white and slender legs. Her skin was white and shiny, delicate and smooth. With such good legs, it would be a pity not to ride a tricycle. Yes. Meg nodded and continued to stare. As long as I don't feel awkward, others will feel awkward. Norma was used to servants lowering their heads in front of her. She did not expect this fellow to stare at her like 2 scorching lights, causing her to unnaturally close her legs as a hint of red rose on her face. However, this guy was even better looking in person. He had a high nose bridge and exquisite facial features. Especially those brown eyes. They were deep and tranquil. He was clearly staring at her, but it didn't seem obscene. Instead, it seemed like he was admiring her, clean and pure. For some reason, her momentum weakened. She coughed softly and said, Do you know that the snake liver you used in the competition was mine? Meg pondered for a moment and said seriously, I won't tell anyone that you are Medusa. Norma was stunned for a while before she came back to her senses. She was so angry that she laughed. Was this guy doing it on purpose, or was he serious? Miss Norma, Mr. Hades is the chef specially hired by Miss Nancy. I was just about to take him to the dormitory to rest. You see, Boson tried to help Meg out of the situation. This third lady was not to be trifled with. Boson, you can go. I will personally take him to the dormitory to rest. Norma ordered directly. Bosang looked at Mag with pity, and then turned to leave. Although he was Nancy's personal butler, he still didn't have the guts to disobey Norma's orders. He could only ask Miss Nancy for instructions after he left. Only Meg and Norma were left in front of the building. Meg looked at Boson, who left without looking back, and then looked at Norma and asked, "Are you sure you want to rest in the dormitory with me?" I said bring. Norma blushed and jumped down from the low wall. Norma was not short, but Meg was too tall, so when she jumped down from the low wall, she had to look up at Meg, which weakened her aura. I know you're Nancy's loyal dog, but you got first place because of my snake liver. So from today onwards you have to be my slave. Do you understand? Norma crossed her arms and raised her voice a little. Did you give me grass? Meg frowned and shook his head. I got first place with my own ability. The snake liver was provided by the program crew and eaten by the judges. What does it have to do with me? You. Norma choked and was speechless for a moment. If there's nothing else, I'll go back to the dormitory to rest. Meg walked past Norma sideways and stopped at the door. He turned back and said, I'm not used to sleeping with others, so please go back. With that, he walked into the villa under Norma's wide-eyed gaze. Is this guy rejecting me to accompany him in bed? There's actually such a person in this world. Norma opened her mouth slightly, and only came back to her senses after a while. Wait, when did I say I was going to sleep with him? Bastard, stop right there. Norma yelled angrily with her hands on her hips. Meg had already arrived at the dormitory on the second floor with a smile on his face. Rich young ladies like Nancy and Norma had no lack of bootlickers around them. Bootlickers of all grades and breeds. For a woman like Nancy, who was as pure and holy as a white lotus, you only needed to show her your ability and uniqueness to attract her attention. As for a brat like Norma, you could not spoil her. The more you did not follow her wishes, the more motivated she would be, and the more she would want to regain her sense of superiority and confidence from you. Meg had already made up his mind to use Norma as a breakthrough, so he naturally wanted to give her a memorable first encounter. The dormitory was not big, but it was not small as a single dormitory. It was about 50 square meters, with a bedroom, a bathroom, a small living room, and an entertainment area. It was also equipped with a small kitchen, with a full set of kitchen utensils that could be used for simple cooking. This was one of the perks of being a specially hired chef. If it were a normal servant, they would live in a multi-person dormitory. Before he sat down, the doorbell rang outside the door. She's really impatient. Meg unbuttoned his shirt and opened the door. Norma, who was outside the door with her little fists clenched and angrily slammed the door, landing 2 heavy punches on Meg's chest. His shirt was open, his sturdy chest, and 2 light sounds of fists hitting flesh. The atmosphere at the door suddenly became a little strange. End of chapter. That you're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.